The camera opens on an empire at its height, an ocean of banners, marble cities gleaming beneath the sun, and legions that stretch to the horizon. From the outside, it looks invincible. Inside the palace walls, however, something far more dangerous than any enemy army stirs in the shadows. In the echoing corridors of power moves a man known to few by name but feared by all in whispers, the Emperor's spy. He is not just an informant or a courier of secrets. He is the silent architect of survival, the one who sees everything, hears everything, and reports directly to the throne. His words can make or unmake a man's destiny. His silence can kill more surely than a blade. The empire he serves stands as a symbol of order and civilization, ruled by an emperor who believes that knowledge is the truest form of power. And so, to safeguard his reign, the emperor builds a network of watchers, agents who live in shadows, listening to merchants, generals, priests, and nobles alike. But among them, one rises above the rest, a man whose mind is as sharp as his loyalty is absolute. He becomes the emperor's invisible hand, his unseen guardian, his shadow. And yet, history will remember him not for what he protected, but for what he destroyed. At the start, his service is pure. He believes in the empire as one might believe in a god, unyielding, eternal, and righteous. His devotion is forged through hardship, a childhood marked by war and hunger, a youth spent surviving where others fell. Every act of betrayal he commits, every truth he distorts, feels justified in the name of order. The spy sees himself not as a deceiver, but as a healer performing surgery on the body politic, cutting away corruption before it can rot the empire from within. His loyalty is unquestionable. His results, undeniable. The emperor rewards him with power that no man outside the royal bloodline has ever known. But power built on fear always extracts its price. As the spy's influence grows, so too does the emperor's dependence on him. The line between service and control begins to blur. Ministers fear to speak without his approval. Generals wage wars on intelligence he provides. Even the emperor, surrounded by flatterers and conspirators, begins to see the world through the spy's reports. And though the spy means only to preserve the empire, he becomes the lens that distorts its vision. A rumor planted in the wrong ear, a truth delayed for a day too long, each small manipulation begins to ripple outward in unseen ways. The palace becomes a labyrinth of masks and murmurs. Courtiers trade bribes for whispers, priests denounce heretics that never existed, and soldiers execute orders forged in the spy's handwriting. The empire, once ruled by decree, is now ruled by suggestion. Yet within this darkness, the spy feels an intoxicating sense of control. For the first time, he is not merely surviving history, he is shaping it. He can prevent wars before they begin, topple rivals before they rise, and keep the emperor's peace through quiet terror. It is an empire of silence, and he is its master. But beneath this calm surface, cracks begin to spread. Each deception must be buried beneath another. Each victory feeds the illusion that truth itself is a weapon to be wielded, not a foundation to be preserved. The spy becomes both guardian and prisoner of his own system. He trusts no one, not his agents, not his allies, not even the emperor himself. The same skills that made him indispensable now isolate him completely. The empire, blind to its dependency on one man's shadow, continues to thrive outwardly even as it begins to hollow from within. In the candlelight of his private chamber, the spy records his reports, unaware that history is watching him. Every coded word, every forged confession, every quiet execution will one day be read as prophecy of doom. The stage is set, the pieces are in motion, and the irony is unbearable. The man who dedicated his life to protecting the empire will become the author of its destruction. What begins as devotion will turn into tragedy, and the shadow behind the throne will soon eclipse the throne itself. He was not born in the palace, nor even within sight of its walls. The man who would become the emperor's most trusted spy began life in the dust and hunger of the frontier provinces, a forgotten child of war. His earliest memories were of smoke, marching soldiers, and the taste of fear. When the empire expanded westward, entire villages were uprooted, and his was one of them. He learned young that survival was not about strength but silence, about listening when others screamed. Those instincts, born of chaos, would one day make him invaluable to the most powerful man alive. As a boy, he was taken in by the Empire's Intelligence Bureau, a secretive institution hidden behind a facade of scribes and record-keepers. There, he learned the trade of shadows, the art of reading faces, of watching a man's eyes when he lied, of speaking 3 truths to deliver 1 perfect falsehood. His tutors were veterans of forgotten wars, agents who had infiltrated enemy courts, poisoners who could recite the language of fear as fluently as any priest. They taught him that loyalty was a currency rarer than gold, and trust was something only fools spent freely. In this crucible of deception, he was forged into something both brilliant and terrifying. A man who could disappear into a crowd, steal a secret with a smile, and never once question why. The empire itself was entering a dangerous age. Though its armies stretched across continents, its borders trembled with unrest. Trade routes brought wealth but also ambition. Governors in distant provinces were becoming kings in all but name, ruling with the arrogance of conquerors. Rebellions simmered, plots fermented, and spies multiplied like insects. The emperor, now aging and mistrustful, knew that swords alone could not hold his realm together. So he turned to the one weapon that had never failed him: information. The empire's survival would depend on the eyes and ears of those who could see what others could not. Men like the young operative who would soon rise from the lower ranks to become the voice behind the throne. His first missions were simple but perilous. He was sent into border towns disguised as a traitor, listening for murmurs of revolt. He bribed local chieftains, intercepted letters, and uncovered smugglers who were funneling weapons to rebel factions. But he went further than his orders demanded. He began weaving connections of his own, creating a web that reached from taverns to temples. His reports were so precise, his insights so unerringly accurate, that the emperor himself took notice. Soon he was summoned to the capital. It was there, in the grand marble halls of the palace, that he first met the man he would serve for the rest of his life. The emperor saw in him not just a spy, but a mirror of his own ambition. The young agent's loyalty was absolute, his intelligence unmatched, and his instincts ruthless. He spoke little, but when he did, it was with the calm certainty of someone who already knew how the game would end. The emperor made him his personal envoy, a position that blended diplomacy, investigation, and quiet intimidation. He was granted access to the inner court, where ministers schemed, generals plotted, and secrets decided the fate of nations. Within months, he uncovered 2 assassination attempts, exposed a smuggling network in the imperial treasury, and orchestrated the downfall of 3 corrupt governors. Each success deepened his bond with the emperor and darkened his reputation among the elite. They called him the Whisper, the man who appeared without warning and vanished without trace. No one knew his true name, his origin, or even where he slept. To the people, he was a myth; to the court, a ghost; to the emperor, a necessity. Yet, beneath the loyalty and the silence, something was shifting. The young spy began to believe that he alone could see what the emperor could not. He saw an empire drunk on power, blind to decay, ruled by arrogance disguised as divine right. In his heart, he told himself he was not betraying anyone, only correcting the course of destiny. With each mission, his power grew. He commanded agents in every city, informants in every temple, and assassins in every province. He created codes so complex that even his closest lieutenants understood only fragments. The empire's veins ran with his messages, its heartbeat was his design. But with power came paranoia. He began to suspect plots that didn't exist, testing his own men with false orders, setting traps for imaginary traitors. His faith in others dwindled to nothing. Only the emperor remained sacred, or so he believed. In private, the emperor praised him but feared him. His reach had become too vast, his influence too deep. Yet dismissing him was impossible. To remove the Whisper was to tear out the empire's eyes. The 2 men became bound by a dangerous symbiosis, a ruler who trusted no one but a spy, and a spy who trusted nothing but his own lies. Their alliance would preserve the empire for a time, but it would also sow the seeds of destruction. For every secret uncovered, another was buried. Every victory carried the price of a new deception. The empire's stability began to depend not on truth or justice, but on the careful manipulation of both. And in that delicate balance, the future of millions rested in the hands of one man, a man who had forgotten where loyalty ended and power began. By the time a decade had passed, the spy had become more than a servant. He was the empire's invisible pulse. His web of agents stretched from the snowy frontiers to the deserts beyond the southern seas, each node tied to him by fear, loyalty, or both. Nothing escaped his notice. Grain shipments, tax records, troop movements, the whispered arguments of nobles after banquets, everything flowed toward him like tributaries feeding a single dark river. In an empire so vast that even the emperor could not see its farthest edges, the spy's reports became the lens through which reality itself was interpreted. And that was where the slow poison began. What had started as truth now became something more malleable. He discovered that by adjusting the details in his reports, by exaggerating one threat, softening another, he could steer imperial policy. If a general grew too popular, a single hint of disloyalty could ensure his reassignment to a distant frontier. If a governor began hoarding wealth, a carefully timed rumor would trigger an audit. At first, these manipulations seemed justified. He told himself it was all for the emperor's safety, for the empire's preservation. But every time he twisted the truth, it grew easier to do it again. The court soon became a stage of half-truths and calculated illusions. Ministers began vying not for the emperor's approval, but for the spy's favor. He could decide who rose and who fell. Foreign envoys sought secret meetings with him, believing his word carried more weight than royal decrees. Even the generals at the front lines waited for his coded messages before daring to move an army. His authority was unspoken but absolute, a phantom government operating beneath the golden canopy of the throne. And yet, with power came a creeping sense of isolation. The empire's whispers grew louder, filled with the names of traitors, some real, many imagined. The spy had created a system that fed on paranoia, and now he was trapped within it. Reports began contradicting one another. His own agents, eager to please, fabricated threats to appear useful. In the absence of truth, he was forced to rely on instinct. And instinct is a dangerous guide in a world built on deception. There were moments when he almost saw the abyss he had created. Once, a governor accused of treason sent him a desperate plea, swearing innocence. The spy ignored it. Weeks later, when the man's family was executed, the documents proving his loyalty surfaced, too late to save them. Another time, a frontier general sent warnings of a real invasion forming beyond the northern steppes. The spy dismissed it as another fabricated crisis. Months later, the border was burned to ash. Each mistake, each death, was hidden under layers of new lies. The empire still functioned, but it was now running on momentum rather than truth. The emperor, meanwhile, had grown older and increasingly dependent on his shadow servant. He no longer read the raw reports himself. He trusted the summaries the spy prepared. "You are my eyes," he would say, resting a weary hand on the spy's shoulder. But those eyes had long since blurred the line between clarity and control. The emperor ruled through the spy's words, and those words were now shaping a distorted world that existed only on parchment and fear. Inside the palace, suspicion became the new currency. Generals spied on ministers, ministers on priests, priests on each other. Each denunciation led to another inquiry, another execution, another promotion. The spy watched it all unfold with growing unease, realizing that he had built a machine that no longer required his hand to operate. It had become self-sustaining, an empire feeding on fear. For the first time, he began to question his own creation. At night, he reread old reports, tracing back the threads of deceit to see where the corruption began. But the lines tangled endlessly, looping back to himself. His intelligence network, once a tool of preservation, had become the empire's disease. He had wanted to create order. Instead, he had created dependency. Still, he could not stop. To expose the truth now would be to expose himself. Every fabricated accusation, every silent execution, Every forged decree led back to his desk. He had become indispensable and irredeemable. And though the empire remained outwardly strong, the foundation beneath was crumbling. The generals no longer trusted the capital. The provinces no longer trusted the crown. And the emperor, surrounded by enemies both real and imagined, trusted only one man, the very one who had unknowingly begun his downfall. As the spy sealed another coded message and pressed the imperial sigil into the wax, he hesitated for the first time in years. He wondered whether the empire he served was real at all, or merely a reflection of his own lies, a structure of shadows, waiting for the first light of truth to burn it away. The fall began not with invasion, but with fear. A single report, one more whisper in the web, reached the emperor's trembling hands, warning that his generals plotted against him. The emperor, already blinded by years of suspicion, demanded answers from the only man he trusted. The spy hesitated, and in that silence, the emperor heard betrayal. From that moment, the empire turned upon itself. Arrests began at dawn. Generals, governors, and ministers vanished overnight. The prisons overflowed, the streets filled with rumors. The emperor trusted no one but the spy, and yet the more he relied on him, the deeper the madness grew. Armies froze at the borders, terrified of acting without orders. Provinces rebelled. The empire's once perfect chain of command shattered under the weight of paranoia. The spy watched helplessly as his own machine devoured everything. Each forged confession, each execution ordered in haste, pushed the empire closer to collapse. He tried to warn the emperor, but the ruler's mind was gone, seeing plots even in his servant's silence. When rebels surrounded the capital, the emperor finally turned on the one man who had always stood by him. "You were my eyes," he shouted, "and you blinded me." Guards seized the spy, and as the palace burned, he realized the truth. He had not destroyed the empire. He had merely shown it what it already was, a masterpiece of fear built to destroy itself. They came for him in silence, just before dawn. Once, soldiers had saluted as he passed. Now they averted their eyes. The spy walked through the same corridors where he had orchestrated the empire's fate, the marble now cracked and stained with the blood of his own victims. The emperor, frail and trembling on his throne, could barely meet his gaze. "You made me see enemies everywhere," he whispered, voice shaking. The spy bowed his head and said nothing. There was nothing left to defend. He had become the ghost of his own creation. Outside, the capital burned. Armies had rebelled, cities had fallen, and the people no longer believed in the emperor's divine power. The intelligence network that once ruled every whisper had collapsed into chaos. No one knew what was true anymore. The spy understood that he had built a weapon the empire could not control, a machine that devoured truth and replaced it with fear. And now it was feeding on its master. When the order came for his execution, he didn't resist. The same system he built to destroy others now turned on him with perfect efficiency. At dawn, he was led into the courtyard, the air heavy with ash and smoke. Before the blade fell, he uttered his final words, "Let them learn what power does to those who think they own it." When the sun rose over the ruins, the empire was already dead, its last loyal servant buried beneath the weight of his own lies. Centuries later, the empire is gone, but its shadow remains. Among its ruins, historians uncover fragments of coded letters, traces of the spy's final confessions. They reveal not a villain, but a man consumed by loyalty, blinded by the belief that control could save what truth could not. His downfall became the empire's, for he was its mirror. Every deception he crafted reflected the fear at its core. Scholars debate his legacy. Was he a patriot who went too far, or a traitor who believed too deeply in order? The truth lies between. His story endures as a warning whispered across centuries, that empires do not fall by force, but by deceit, by the silence of those who know the truth and bury it. As the camera fades from the crumbling statues to the windswept ruins, the narrator's voice lingers. He was the emperor's shadow, the man who saw everything, except what his loyalty had become. His empire died in fire, his lesson survives in history.